So I will just say welcome to everyone in the room, and this is the annual Phillips Barry Invited Lecture, which is sponsored by the Music and Song section of the American Folklore Society. And I am the co-convener of the Music and Song section. My name is Steve Winnick, and our other co-convener is here in the front. It's Margaret Steiner, Marge Steiner. I think most of you know her. And we're here to introduce Dan Sheehy, who is our distinguished speaker today. Dan Sheehy has been one of our esteemed colleagues in Washington, D.C. since I've been there, and for many years before that, as one of the great federal folklorists, as we call ourselves sometimes. Dan's first official field work was done for the 1976 Bicentennial Smithsonian Festival of American Folklife, and he did that field work in December of 1974, which means that it will be 40 years ago next month. So pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing.
After that, Dan got a Fulbright scholarship and went to Veracruz, Mexico, where he continued to cultivate his lifelong love of Mexican vernacular music. And then he went to work for the NEA for many years. And after that, back to the Smithsonian. And he's had a number of positions at the Smithsonian, including the acting director of the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, and his current position, which is the director of Smithsonian Folkways recordings. And Dan will tell us a little bit about the history of Smithsonian Folkways, but it's one of our really important institutions in getting traditional music and traditional culture out there to the world. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our distinguished speaker, Daniel Sheehy.
You know, I told him 20 seconds worth of stuff, and he came up with 2 minutes worth of introduction. How did he do that? Anyway, thank you all very much. What I'm going to do here tonight basically is talk a little bit and then get into the story part via video of the Great Music, Great Stories theme here. And I've already gave you the pregame show here. I have one or two that are not there, so I'll be playing a couple of things that are related to that, but it'll be kind of fun to see what they actually turn out to be. So my title is Curator and Director of Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, and never in my life did I think that the word curator would be associated, probably even in the same sentence as me. I came from Central California, the Central Valley there, and was happily studying at UCLA in the mid-'60s to be a high school band director. That was my lifelong dream for a couple years anyway. And I was a student there, and I got a job. I had like 3 jobs, and I had one of them was working in the Institute for Ethnomusicology at UCLA in the audio lab. And one day, this is about 1967, this gentleman appeared in the office, and he had all this Ashanti garb on. He was very elegant looking, but if you look closer, you saw that his eyes were about as bloodshot as human eyes can possibly be. And so I fell into conversation with him. It turns out that he was the 10th son of the Ashanti Hene, the king of the Ashantis, and the queen mother had died, and he, Kwesi Badu, was the master drummer for the Ashanti court. And he'd been drumming and leading all the musical part of those things for a week without hardly sleeping, and not to mention all the gin and things like that. Then they put him on a plane to come over to Los Angeles to be an artist in residence at UCLA. And so we became friends. He became my next door neighbor. I became his disciple. Started to play Adua and Kete and all these things, and some Ewe music as well as Ashanti music. And it was one of the most thrilling musical experience I'd ever had. I played jazz, played symphony orchestra in the Kern County Philharmonic and all this, but here was this incredible music that I could hardly even comprehend, let alone perform. About the same time, a friend of mine invited me to play trumpet in a rhythm and blues band called the Thunder Brothers. This was about the same year, 1967. And I I said, sure, you know, love rhythm and blues. So I got recruited into this all African American except for me and an Italian Mexican sax player. And we played down in South Compton in the late 60s. Black Panthers, only white face for blocks and blocks and blocks. But it was really one of the greatest experiences I ever had in my life. We played there Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. And Jeffy's Club from 9 to 1. And it was like I felt just privileged to be in this super rich environment of just people just doing it with the sounds of James Brown and Otis Redding and Wilson Pickett and Sam and Dave and Aretha Franklin and all that. About that time, as well, I was wandering around the music department one day, and I hear this, after playing Ashanti music, and I heard this tinkling of strings, and I turned the corner, and there's this harp about this big, and a melody guitar playing really fast, and a rhythm guitar, and it was music from Veracruz, the song Jarocho, and 3 students were playing that music, and it was, my first impression was, oh my God, this is like African music on strings, because the whole thing was organized around a rhythmic cycle, kind of like you know the bell pattern. That's sort of a major organizing principle in much West African music. And here was the same thing with Son Jarocho. I was just fascinated. I started to see these connections between James Brown and the Ashanti music and Son Jarocho. And when our rhythm and blues band fell apart because our electric guitar player was recruited by the group War, and he went off and rode the Cisco Kid and did all kinds of great things, and got totally ripped off by the owners of the group, and lived in poverty after he left the group to a certain extent. A guy said, "Hey, we have this mariachi group here. Why don't you come and join us? And we need a trumpet player." And I said, "Okay, that sounds pretty good." And that was like 1968. And here I was, studying to be a band director with a very limited bandwidth of music that was part of what I was supposed to be teaching and dealing with. And I just stopped in my tracks and thought, well, what's going on here? Where's the music of James Brown? Where's the music of Kwesi Badu? Where's the Son Jarocho? Where's the mariachi music? And all this stuff that we're supposed to be teaching, music supposedly, in the public schools. And so right at that moment, I think what really the title of this talk here crystallized in sort of a proto form around two pillars that really, I think, guided me the rest of those 40 years or so. One of those was awe for the beauty and the awesomeness of human accomplishment and creation in music. And the other, frankly, was, I'd say this, but it was indignance. I was really kind of pissed off, to tell you the truth. And I was really disappointed. I felt people had let me down, and somehow in the system. Then I started to see how really a lot of the main decisions that were made in shaping our education system, my education, were really based in social hierarchies. And those invisible social hierarchies out there. And this box that I was supposedly going to be put in became way too small to exist in. So I said, got to do something about this. So I switched to ethnomusicology at UCLA. That's where I found a lot of these musics, and that's what I was attracted to. In the process, I got to meet some great folklorists working for my master's degree. D.K. Wilgus, Stanley Robe were there, and we had a great time. In my ethnomusicology studies, I remember there was one course, which is actually one course more than just about any other program I ever had, It was in applied ethnomusicology, and the topic of the seminar was how to infect a community with X music. So, I'll take it. Infect wasn't exactly the word that I had in mind, but nevertheless, this sort of tied into these two pillars that were, this two-piston engine that was driving me forward here. And so I put together this whole program in the San Joaquin Valley of the radio and the festivals and teaching programs of mariachi music. And interestingly enough, that would have been about 1971. In 1984, I think it was, Hugo Morales and Radio Bilingüe organized a mariachi conference in the San Joaquin Valley. They had a festival, they had radio, Mañanitas con Mariachi, every day or 5 days a week. And they had classes for kids. So, and just a little minor digression that's still within the scope of all this. Hugo Morales, the head of the Radio Bilingüe, told me later that, you know how I found out about that idea, don't you? And I said, I have the foggiest idea. He said, I read about it in an NEA annual report. That was a grant that we had given to San Antonio for the first annual mariachi conference. And Hugo had picked up on that. So just, sometimes you just feel like this is moving hand up there, doing this or that. Anyway, okay, in 1973, I was kidnapped by folklorists, and I never got let loose. Bess Lomax Haas, to this day I can't remember how we connected, but she was in Los Angeles, was teaching at Cal State Northridge, and got in touch with me and said, hey, I'm going to have Barbara Rahm teach my folklore class, and I have another class I'd like you to teach. It's called Ethnological Music. And I thought, well, wouldn't be my title, but sure, it's already on the books. And it was really interesting, half anthropologists and half music people. So I tried to kind of split the difference there, and so not to over-intimidate the anthropologists and not to totally lose the music students. And that led to Bess inviting me, and that's what Steve mentioned there, to do field work for the Smithsonian Folklife Festival for the 75 and then later on 76 festival. And I remember going to my first meeting with Bess and Barbara. I had like 5 jobs, teaching different places and all this, and I had like 45 minutes slotted in there, to sit down with Bess and Barbara Rahm. And so I got there. 3 hours later, I was looking at my watch, and I said, oh my God, these folklorists can really talk. But that talk, there was a there in that talk. This wasn't just talk. This was substance. And this is kind of a main point for me that kind of shaped thinking in 2 other stages of life after that, is that the festival wasn't an end. The festival was a means to an end. And if I can find this, they had some really great high-flying rhetoric. I have to say, I'm still a sucker for high-flying rhetoric. And let me guess who wrote this. Okay. The uprooting, this is about the Folklife Festival, Festival of American Folklife. The uprooting and destruction of cultures and the consequent gray out or disappearance of the human variety presents as serious a threat to the future happiness of mankind as poverty, overpopulation, and even war. Soon there will be nowhere to go and nothing worth staying home for. Healthy cultural development depends on the present gene pool and its variety of strains. No help with this, Anna. Who do you think said that? Thank you. Anyway, later on, Ralph Rinser would call the Folklife Festival, then still a Festival of American Folklife, a declaration of cultural independence. I just love these. These little things because it kind of grab you and then let you run with it. So anyway, I was totally pulled into the Folklife Festival. I to this day think of myself as a Folklife Festival baby. And then the festival ended. The bicentennial festival ended in guess which year? 1976. And Bess Lomax Haas moved over to the National Endowment for the Arts. In the meantime, I'd gotten Fulbright. I was down in Veracruz studying the Son Jarocho and having a great time. And she called up and said, "Honey, would you be interested in coming up to Washington and working here in the federal government?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, but if you think it's a good idea, I might do that because I'd really fallen in with Bess." And so it turned out, and I got in my 1964 Galaxy and headed north from Veracruz up to Washington, D.C. And got stopped on the way south of the border, I remember, by these guys with guns about that big. This would have been 1977, and they said, and I had harps and guitars and my 2 pair of pants and my 3 shirts and all these records and books and things like that in my car. And the guy says, "Okay, take everything out of the car. We have to see what you have there." This took me a day to put all this stuff in this car. Anyway, so we started to talk, and he says, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Washington, D.C." He says, "What are you going to do there?" He says, "Well, I'm going to work for the government. I'm going to work for Jimmy Carter." Because, if you're in the federal government, the president is your boss, right, in the executive branch. And so he says, "Jimmy Carter, he's the one who's paying for us to be here. Go on by." So I went on by, didn't take anything out of my car. Got to NEA, and then I remember something Bess would tell me several times periodically, that money is a blunt instrument, she would say, which, I think that's pretty true, because it's just like a festival. A festival was a means to an end. Money, meaning grants, were a means to an end. Money doesn't do anything. People do things. Organizations do. It really isn't about the money. So this whole idea of thinking of what you're doing and what tool you have to use as a means to an end, and seeing how it can fit into the rest of the cultural surround to make something greater happen. That's part of your mission. That's part of your goal. Was again that same principle transferred from the festival to grant giving. And also the whole idea of cultural strategies. We talked a lot about in-reach and outreach. In-reach strategies, that is helping communities come together around their own values, their own traditions, their own selves, their shared everything. And outreach, the strategy of maybe a PBS program or a traveling exhibition to bridge across cultures, and maybe even, as Alan Lomax wrote in there, and in his cultural nurturing and cultural feedback, give some feedback back to that community of origin there. So that was the NEA part of it. That was 78 to 2000, and then some friends of mine at the Smithsonian started chatting with me periodically whenever we'd run into each other and say, "Well, Tony Seeger is leaving the Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, going to UCLA. Got a great professorial deal there, and they're going to need another director. Maybe you should throw your hat in the ring." I'm looking at Olivia there. I remember her vividly. Being one of those folks. And it's like, no, okay. Of course, this was at the NEA. This is like, you remember what happened in 1995, right? Right. In another 10 years, I'm not going to have very many people nodding. I've learned, that's one thing I've learned in life. You have to be careful what you say. One time I when Chris Strakowitz once told me that when the Folkways Records collection went to the Smithsonian, it was like Dr. Know-It-All meeting Mr. Peabody. and I, like the album notes and the Smithsonian, and I was talking to some group once, and I suddenly realized that no more than 10% of the people knew who Mr. Peabody was. So there's a lesson there. There's a lesson there for all of you. So anyway, so here I threw my hat in the ring, ended up being the director and curator of Smithsonian Folkways Recordings right at the end of 2000. And so here I was again. Didn't have money. Didn't have a festival. It was one nearby, but we had these things. We just moved from these things to these things. CDs, and so I sort of sat down. I thought, oh, okay, here we are again. We have these things called recordings. We have this world out there. We want to leverage some sort of cultural action. We want to have impact on the world. So what can we do? What can we do with this? Thinking of it as a means, not an end. Now, I have to say that I will forever be indebted to two people particularly. One was Tony Seeger, because he moved in a really, really tough situation when the Folkways collection came to the Smithsonian in 1987 officially, and he started in 1988. And there was a commitment to make everything available. Imagine all these cassettes, LPs, and 2,168 albums. Moses Ash, who started Folkways in '48, had published an average of one album per week for 36 years. That was pretty amazing. Exactly. Pretty intimidating too, actually. And Moses Ash was the other person I was really indebted to, because at one point, in fact, it was more recently, it really hit home one more time and maybe a little more vividly. A lot of people talk about Folkways being an encyclopedia of humanity in recorded sound. And that's kind of the first phrase, and then you hear the story about, the letter J or the letter Q, not losing. That's just as important to have that in the alphabet as any other letter. And so he wanted everything to stay in print forever. And that was a pretty ambitious thing to do. But as Michael Ash, Moses Ash's son, wrote to our advisory board meeting just about a month ago, actually, that really wasn't what it was about. It was not so much about being an encyclopedia of humanity and recorded sound as it was being a strategic force in the world. And this hit home recently when I was invited to give a talk on Folkways at the National Museum of Folk Art Museum of Korea Folk Art Museum. And I started to look, so I said, okay, let's see what we have from Korea. So I went back in the collection, and sure enough, guess which years the first Korean recordings were published by Folkways? 1951, 1952. What happened in 1951, 1952 into 3? The Korean War, exactly. Then you saw all this publishing of world cultures, Haiti, cultures that were sort of in the news, but it's like in the news and maybe not the best way, most complimentary way. There's this whole strain of collaborating with Harold Kurlander and all kinds of folks to get more of the sounds of the world out and around. What happened in the early 60s? Civil rights movement. What did Moses Ash do? He published album after album of music with voices of the civil rights movement. Later on, when the Vietnam War came along, and I just started following this through line here, what did Moses Ash do? He published 2 albums of folk music of Vietnam. And so Folkways was very clear to me, much more than an encyclopedia of humanity through recorded sound. It was a strategic force. Okay, so it came to the Smithsonian. Tony was there until about 1999. He inherited this dynamic legacy of Moses Ash. He made it available. He found technological ways to make it available forever. So as you know, in perpetuity, I found it is the life of the Republic plus 5,000 years. I'd wondered how long perpetuity was for a long time. We commit to that, forever, but I never knew how long perpetuity was until some lawyer told me. Anyway, the mine was rich. The collection was rich. The great icons. Steve up here was playing some music of Pete Seeger. There's Woody Guthrie, of course, Leadbelly, starting in the late 50s, Ella Jenkins, who, by the way, was by far the best-selling artist on Folkways Records and Smithsonian Folkways Recordings. As far as that goes, she just turned 90 in Chicago. And say what? Still performing. That's right. Still performing. In fact, this weekend she's at the National Association for the Education of Younger Children in Dallas, doing her Ella Jenkins Rockstar thing. Thanks for the reminder. So Tony, he basically, his first step was a great step. He was the perfect person for the job. Pete Seeger's nephew. He knew all the people, and he welcomed me to the Smithsonian by telling me his welcoming story when he first got the job at Folkways, and he was at a reception, and Harold Leventhal, who was Pete Seeger's manager and also sort of a great folk figure in the folk world, said, "Tony, it's so great to have you as the head of Folkways, and we're just so pleased. And on a Monday, you'll hear from our lawyer. We're suing you. Welcome to the world of music. The music industry has to be one of the most litigious worlds possible, right?" Anyway, so and I got my fair share of that over the years. Actually, that's just the way it goes. And also, Tony figured out a way to get over a pretty big challenge, because Folkways did not come with a budget. It came with a budget for a director and an archivist, and then a part-time assistant. And so, as you know, in the early 2000s, there was major shifts in the music industry. Napster, lots of piracy, lots of revenues going down in CD sales and all that. And that's been a real challenge. So part of the whole story of Folkways is how to stay alive, and that's part of the Moses Ash story as well. Anyway, Tony did it, and somehow it's still going today, despite me being there. And Tony had to also prioritize, because the world is big, Folkways is small. Our archive is very limited in space, and he prioritized, is very smart, collecting other record labels. So today, because they come with intellectual property, right, so we can do something with them. The latest acquisition of the 12 record labels was UNESCO. I'm pleased to say that every week, just like the 2 blogs a week that Steve Winnick does here from the American Folk Life Center, we have 2 new blogs for our new albums, the reissues that come out on of the UNESCO album series, 127 albums. So here we go. This translates in the Folkways world for me to great music and a great story. So anytime we can, I try to select, first of all, privileged music of new recordings particularly, because, by the way, I didn't say this, but the mine was pretty much mined. All the Woody Guthrie tracks were out there, all the Leadbelly tracks were out there, they're all in circulation. So here I am with a pickaxe and no gold in the mine, so I had to figure out what to do. So what do? You get grants. That's what you do, and you do new projects. And so the thinking behind this was this 2-pillared thinking, going back to the music awe and going back to the cause that drives you in one direction or another. The cause being one shared with the communities that you're working with to get their music out and around. And this was also a godsend for me because one time I wrote, where is it? The Harvard Dictionary of World Cultures, I think, says there's something like 5,000 cultures in the world. Our Endangered Languages program said there were 6,000 or 7,000 languages in the world. Smithsonian Folkways can publish about 15 albums per year. So having a way to kind of narrow that down was a godsend. So anyway, this led to two principles, and then I'll move into a video here. One is work with musics that are more than musics. What I mean by that is music that carries some meaning with it. In our Latin, we have 3 series because we had funding for 3 series. The Aga Khan series of music from Central Asia, the African American Legacy series, the Latino series. The Latino series, Bandera Musical is the concept, meaning a musical flag of identity. So this is what I mean by music that's more than music. The other piece of this is, I wish I had my old Shure microphones. These have lots of pops in them. It's very distracting. Anyway, what's that? Hi! How's that? Okay. Kind of get it out there, right? Is to make a recording more than a recording. And all I can say is I'm so indebted to Al Gore for inventing the internet. I'm indebted to all of our team, our marketing team, all of our folks. And we have like incredible stats. This is what I mean by a recording that's more than a recording. We have like 180 videos that go along with the recordings. For this last year, we got 5 million visits. We have a monthly mailing list of 63,000 people. 115,000 teacher lessons were downloaded free. You have to pay 99 cents a track for the music that goes with it, but lessons are free. 402,000 album note downloads, 765,000 video views, 2 million SoundCloud plays. That was an increase of 2,993%, I want you to know, because SoundCloud just got started. And so this is something that being a part of the museum can really bring to this record label, and so we want to take advantage of it as much as possible. I'm going to show a little video. Wake up the computer, and give you the story behind the story. First story here is, you'll notice in all of these there are some principles. One is I'm showing videos because I've become a total video devotee. I mean, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is probably worth about 10,000 words per second because of all the richness, the interrelationships you can see, the action, the people, their first voice presence, and also privileging exactly that, the first voice in everything we do, be it album notes, be it images, be it the whole concept of the album, whatever it might be. Now, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easier. When you have a partner like the Aga Khan Trust for Culture and their Aga Khan Music Initiative, and you get some really nice subsidy to produce really attractive albums. And they have their own video team, and they have a curator like Ted Levin from Dartmouth, who's really very acquainted with Central Asian musics. Then you can kind of sit back and say, oh, this is gorgeous. What a beautiful thing this is. And the story behind this series is 10 DVD and CD albums that are just gorgeous, first-rate production values, thanks to the support of the Aga Khan, was to move into this post-Soviet, this margin in Central Asia around Russia and the former Soviet Union at a very key time. After 1991, the end of the Soviet Union, these countries were there, these cultures were there, these musical traditions were there, and suddenly, there was a tabula rasa, there was a blue sky horizon. There's an opportunity to really reach back, grab what you had, and then move forward with it. And that's exactly what the Aga Khan, the concept behind their music initiative was. And so this is, I'm putting this up here partly because it's one of my favorites, and also partly because our fellow record label in Mexico City, Corazon, is kind of like the Folkways of Mexico, called me up and said, hey, we'd like to do a Mexican launch of this album. It's Alim Kasimov and his daughter Farhana, and performing Mugham from Azerbaijan. And I said, that's a really great idea. Unfortunately, we already did it like 3 years ago, but they said, oh, it's okay. And so we had a nice launch event. They invited them over. They did 5 concerts. They're very successful, and everyone was very excited in Mexico City about this. So this is kind of obviously a strategically selected recording and tradition and artists, and also it's got a nice second wave here. So this is about, I'll play these are usually like 5 to 6 minutes.
Belə yadda qalır ki, uşaqlar o vaxtı bir simlə taxtanın bu başına bir mıx, bu başına bir mıx vururdular və belə taxtı taxırdılar və onu çağırdılar, orada səs çıxırdı bir. Mən də o şeydən düzəldib çağırıb oxuyordum. Sonra öyle gözəl bir ənənə kimi var ki, səhər 6-da radionu açanda atam gil, anam gil onu açırlar, xod verirlər. Biz o musiqinin eşdə yorğandan dururdu o ayağa belə. Saday musiqiyə qoşdur mənimlə. Belə sonra bizim bir böyük sənətkarımız vardı, Hacı Məmmədov. O məni televiziyaya çıxartdı birinci dəfə. Sonra mən özüm belə qərara gəldim ki, mənim öz bir dəstəm olsun, tar kamança. Mən də belə oldu ki, bu tar kamançanı yaratdım. Elşən Mansurovla tanış oldum, onunla getdim, işlədim. Malik Mansurovla işlədim. Şimdi cavanlarla da işləyirik. Ondan sonra da Fərqanə gəldi bizim sənətə. Gəl mənim sevgilim, nazlı dilbəyəm. Gəl mənim sevgilim.
O evdə məndən də əvvəl muğam da olmuşdu. Mən muğamı bir anam kimi, atam kimi, evdəki bir yaşayış tərzi kimi mən görürdüm. Elə mən Fatimə yaşda olardım, 4 yaş yarımda, 5 yaşımda atam mənə qəzəllər öyrətməyə başlamışdı.
Mesela biri var, öyle bir hareketsiz bir şey. Buna el vurmak olmaz, bunu büküp koymak olur. Ama bu ruhi musiki ölüye gelip bakmak olmaz. Onu harekete getirmek için onu ne etmek lazımdır? Ayıltmak lazımdır, ona nefes vermek lazımdır, ona... Kıskandı gözüm, yaşlarım, man kurudukça rahmeyledim bu mesele aparıcı qüvvədən asıldı, ifasıdan asıldı. Bu bir yükdür, bir şərədir. Gəlir götürür, kim nə qədər aparır, qoyur yerə. Sonra o birisi neçə ildən sonra gəlir, o götürür, aparır. İndi də kimin bahasında olacaq? Bizim borcumuz da onu öyrəzmək ki, bu ənənəni, bu şeyi aparsın. Muğam elə bil ki, bir filtrdir, insanın bütün çirkabların, hirsin, nervisin, tamahın hamısını çıxardır bir anlığa və Allaha inamlı, pak bir an olur.
Do y'all remember those Folkways LPs? The black cardboard sleeves there with the thing? What was inside those? You had two things, right? Right. You had the sound and you had the story. That's another thing that I really love about kind of pushing these two things out there, is it's just like totally dead center in the Folkways legacy. Okay, moving on to our Latino series. I think probably we have most videos from that because we've had this great partnership with the Smithsonian Latino Center that I was pleased to be the acting director of for a year. And actually start off with that man right there, Russell Rodriguez. Raise your hand, Russell. Don't turn around. Thank you. I started to work, I believe it was on October 19th, 2000, and there was a grant deadline on October 21st, 2000. And so we put some money in, and we got a grant. We brought Russell, and he analyzed and annotated the entire Latin American and Latino USA collection to kind of identify what our strengths were, what our weaknesses were, and that would help us, determine which way we wanted to move first and move it all. There was this fellow I ran into working as a musician, me that is, and him that is, from El Salvador. In the Washington, D.C. area, there's a major population, and it has been ever since the Civil War in the late 80s and early 90s. And most people in Washington, maybe compared to the Salvadoran community in Los Angeles, for example, are from Oriente, from the east. That's where the war was the most severe. That's where poverty was and still is most severe. The three departments of Morazan, if those sound familiar to you, thinking back to the news from those days, Morazan, San Miguel, and La Unión departments. And this fellow was a very unassuming violinist, singer. His name was Trini. His last name was Lobo, like wolf. I never met anybody with that name before. I found out how that came about later. And I had tried to, working on the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, put together a representation of traditional music from El Salvador as a part of something. Olivia probably remembers better than I do what that was. So I went down there. I worked, first of all, I was the co-editor of the Garland Encyclopedia of World Music volume on Caribbean, South America, Mexico, and Central America. I had a heck of a time finding someone to write on traditional music of El Salvador. I finally found one person, and he wrote an article for us, and it was okay. Doing field work, I worked with the Ministry of Culture And I had learned about this music in Washington, D.C. that was in those 3 departments called chanchona music. Chanchona means big pig or big sow. And it was what the people in that region called the string bass that they made themselves. The string bass, 3 strings on the string bass, nylon strings. And I was kind of amazed that no one, at least they wouldn't admit to it in the university, the music expert, and people in the Ministry of Culture, where was the chanchona? It was not on the radar at all. And so I headed off to chanchona land there over in the east part of the country. And I'd heard about this radio station, Radio Chaparrastique. So I went to them, and I actually working with Trini Lobo back from DC, hooked me up with his brother. And we put this whole picture together on immigration, on continuity and change of meaning and chanchona music from El Salvador up in the mountains to Washington, D.C., and how in the Washington, D.C. side, how much of a cultural glue it was, how much it really bonded people together. And Trini would say, you know, when we get together and play this music, we're home. And it didn't matter where home was. It's where the music was. They were home. And so we did this little piece that was taken by a young filmmaker, and he did like a 2-hour and 45-minute version of this on his own. And this is the piece taken from the Salvadoran side of things on the chanchona. And it accompanies a recording called Soy Salvadoreño. The name of their group is Los Hermanos Lobo, the Lobo brothers. Oops. What have I done? Somebody save me from myself. Where's the video player?
Aquí casi la mayoría, como aquí usted ya vio las calles aquí como son, aquí casi que son este estilo de pickup así 4x4.
Here we go. Okay, lights.
Aquí casi la mayoría, como aquí usted ya vio las calles aquí como son, aquí casi que son este estilo de pickup así 4x4. Y a veces que cuando vamos muy lejos, que es muy pequeño un carro de estos, pues nos bajamos hasta por allá, a la zona, a plan, al Giote, y allá nos vamos en otro, bien en bujo, en carros más grandes, con todo y instrumentos. Nosotros desde pequeños ya agarrábamos instrumentos y los poníamos ahí a hacer bulla, cuando ellos venían a los ensayos nosotros nomás los sentábamos por ahí y nos decíamos a fijar y así fue como fuimos aprendiendo.
Y viajando por América con los hermanos Lobo.
Por la pobreza ellos decidieron viajar para trabajar ellos allá, porque aquí en verdad solo de música no se pasa uno. No, ellos son músicos de primera calidad, yo ya los conozco muy bien a ellos, ya. Yo de ellos aprendí mucho.
Viajando con la chanchona yo me encontré con la mirada de una bonita mujer. Viajando con la chanchona yo me encontré.
Trini, también aprendí mucho de él, él es mi hermano. Sí, muchísimo.
Me sentí complacido de mi gente.
cuando yo comencé a levantar el grupo, lo agarré de los cortes del liceo, estaba pequeñito. El otro que anda aquí, el de las congas, bien pequeñito. Ya el liceo yo le estuve dando clases más o menos, ya cuando fue para allá ya era un buen vihuelista ya.
Bailando al ritmo de chanchonas, todo el mundo se pone a vacilar.
Favorecido mucho Guzmín, Trine, porque la mayoría de instrumentos que andamos ellos los han enviado a la remesa para que nosotros los compremos acá. Y por lo menos el violín que yo ando ahí, ese me lo mandó Guzmín de allá. Sí. Porque ahorita todos los que son los instrumentos ahorita están bien caros. Así es. El mayor apoyo es más de la gente de Oriente, de toda la gente que escucha Radio Separada. La radio nos ha dado mucho levante, mucho reconocimiento.
La música de chanchona es muy nuestra, es muy regional en el oriente del país. Nosotros en Oriente, nuestra cultura es la chanchona propia, del río Lempa al río Paz con Honduras.
Que es nacida del campo, del corazón de la gente del campo, que es nacida como la música ranchera de México, que es nacida como el tango de Argentina, como las gaitas, como los gaiteros, como la samba de Brasil. Esa es la nuestra, es el folclore nuestro. El zouk es un ritmo alegre, ¿verdad? Que lo baila cualquier gente, y el campesino tiene su propia pulum pulum, que son las chanchonas, y que cualquier canción, cualquier ritmo lo adaptan a eso.
Hay ciertos músicos que preparan violín, hacen la guitarra, le hacen el bajo, le hacen todos los instrumentos y a precios meramente cómodos si lo vemos en el sentido de costo. Aquí la mayoría de propietarios de grupos construyen sus instrumentos. No va a morir tan fácil aquí en el país.
Tocando la chanchona por aquí, la chanchona por allá, la chanchona por acá. Bailando al ritmo de chanchonas, todo el mundo se pone a vacilar. Tocando la chanchona por aquí, la chanchona por allá, la chanchona por acá. Bailando al ritmo de chanchonas, todo el mundo se pone a vacilar. Qué lindo Acapulco y Viña del Mar, pero qué lindas muchachas para reír y gozar.
That shot was taken on the side of what's now a Middle Eastern food restaurant about 4 blocks from my house. But the wall just looked just right. So we put that as the Salvador backdrop there. So this recording, as far as I know, and I've looked around quite a bit, is the only recording that has any sort of notes with it that tells the story of chanchona music in El Salvador, in the United States, anywhere. And it was strategically chosen because it's one of our large Latino populations in this country, and that's our main audience at this point. But at the same time, you know, since about a quarter of the country, of the population, migrated to the United States, there are lots of connections and lots of feedback to El Salvador as well. Okay, I don't have this great. I'm looking at Russell here because Quetzal had this great video, but it's on the computer that failed us here. So I'm going to jump now to. There's another story. This is a story of music from Iraq. There was an artist actually who lives in Albuquerque here, and nearby, and he was recommended to us by Stephen Felt, who has his own record label there, and had worked with Rahim Al-Hajj, and he's an oud player, and we thought he was pretty good, and we thought it was since it was only like 3-4 years after 9/11, and there was still a lot of, you know, they didn't allow school buses to go to the Smithsonian for, I don't know, a year, 2 years. They wouldn't let them drive into Washington, D.C. And here we have Rahim, who was, when he left Iraq, they took everything from him at the border, including his oud, his family oud. And he was a refugee, came to the United States, rebuilt his life, and we thought it might be a nice idea to record him. So we didn't have any money to do this, but we could get him back there. We got him and a drummer from Los Angeles to fly into Baltimore Washington Airport and drive down to our sound engineer, Pete Reiniger's house, to do a recording. And by the way, I should give credit both to Pete Reiniger and Charlie Weber, our video producer in the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, because they both do a great job in actually making these videos. They flew in to Baltimore Washington Airport, and they were driving down, rented a car, to Hyattsville, down this highway called 295. And it was late at night. It was dark. They weren't from there. They were lost. They weren't sure what state they were in even. They took an off-ramp that circled them around on the other side of the freeway, and they came up to these two imposing gates with armed guards. It turned out that they had driven into the front gate of the National Security Agency. I kid you not. And so here are these two guys, two Arab guys, lost, supposedly, and they were detained for an hour and a half, which, you know, they could laugh about it later, but it wasn't very funny at the time. And ended up, stayed near Pete's house, did this recording, and so we don't have backdrops of Iraq here. But this is a short 3-minute piece that we did with some interview of Rahim and their music. Not mess this up this time. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. There it is.
It's very important to me to make connection with my audience first, because, you know, we don't know about Iraq. We talk about Iraqi stories, we talk about Iraqi culture, Iraqi music, and through their story and making music to make connection with my audience. I'm from Iraq, and I've been here 5 years. I live in the United States right now. I think it's important here from Iraq and to be in this current time, because to make this understanding between culture and between ideas and thoughts, and to see Iraqi people have music and not just war. Perfect timing. I live in New Mexico. I didn't choose Albuquerque, really. United Nations chose Albuquerque for me. Because for 2 reasons. First reason, because they said it's a good musical scene, and I'm interested in art, and there's great art. And the second reason was because it's desert, like Iraq. Oud is unfamiliar instrument for a lot, you know, Western people, and even musicians at the same time. So what should it look like, and which kind of sound does it present, and which kind of mode and scales does work this instrument with, and that's to me it's very important. You know, like for example, chord tone, which is not existed in Western music, because it's discord for the Western ear. Music, it always engaged, you know, strongly with life. This album is tradition. It means maqams, Iraqi maqams, and their improvisation. You don't need to say it. I mean, you don't need to sing it to be clear that, oh, this is Iraqi. You know, when you play the song, everybody knows what you're playing.
I just realized that was made on Cinco de Mayo, 2005 there. I said, yeah. Anyway, we have time for maybe one more video and then have a little discussion or whatever y'all want to do. I have like 5 more, so I'm going to have to pick strategically here. I think maybe since it's 9 o'clock, I'll pick one that has a little more up-tempo thing to it. The storyline here, this is music from the Dominican Republic. There's a tradition there called a signature tradition called merengue típico, a long time ago just called merengue. They had a major 151st year celebration. I don't know how exactly what determined that first year of the merengue típico. It has a kind of a complicated history because the dictator Trujillo chose it as his favorite music. Some people of the older set still kind of remember that, and so it has a little baggage. But nevertheless, there's this real excitement about a revival in Santiago, which is the northern part up in a little slightly more mountainous area of the merengue típico. There are 2 stories here. That's one. Merengue típico has a signature music, has a bandera musical, a musical flag of identity. And the other is one that we picked here because, purposely because it represents something that's happening, at least in parts of Latin America, and that is that women are really moving into the domain of traditional music in a way that has never happened as far as anybody knows. And in the Dominican Republic, there was a pioneer, a pionera, named, she still is with us, Fefita La Grande, who moved into this rough and tumble male domain and nightclubs and car washes. You know, they play a lot of merengue played at car washes there, and all kinds of social events like that. And this is the second generation. La India Canela represent the next generation of women moving in the domain of the merengue típico. And she tells her own story in her own way here. But we were looking to this, and this is told in the notes and told in other ways, that this is if you can kind of magnify this and put it in Chile, put it in Colombia, put it in Venezuela, put it in Mexico, other places, there's a thread here that's much larger than just this and this one example. So this is La India Canela, and you can see when we go in, we try to make as much noise locally as possible. So in this case, we got the newspapers out, and so at the very end, she holds up her little newspaper article with her face on the front page there, which is kind of nice too. She was happy about that. So a little extra push of impact. La India Canela. All right. I'm going to do it again, folks.
Mi nombre es Lidia María Hernández, soy de Limón, de Villa González. Recuerdo que en mi casa, desde que yo estaba bien chiquita, pues siempre veía acordeones. En la casa había varios que tocaban el acordeón. Entonces yo venía con esa inquietud desde chiquitica, ¿no? Porque además también como vivíamos en el campo, en ese tiempo tampoco teníamos televisión, entonces el único juguete que yo tenía era un acordeón. Vamos a darle una pasadita, ¿qué le parece?
Eres tan linda, eres tan bella que me encanta. Aquí solita yo te quiero ahora y siempre. En ti consagro mi cariño y mi asistencia. Y pienso amarte a ti solita eternamente. Y pienso amarte a ti solita eternamente.
Yo digo que Dios le da a cada quien un don. La música de acordeón es un don muy especial. Yo digo que uno viene como ungido del vientre de la madre.
Eres tan linda, eres tan bella que me encanta. Aquí solita yo te quiero ahora y siempre. En ti consagro mi cariño y mi asistencia. y pienso amarte a ti solita eternamente, y pienso amarte a ti solita eternamente.
Porque es una música muy especial porque no se aprende en una escuela, o sea, tú vienes con esa vocación desde el vientre de la madre, como dije al principio. Entonces yo siento que yo vengo con esa vocación.
Antes de casarte, pasa por aquí. Antes de casarte, pasa por aquí. Que si me corresponde, yo te haré feliz. Si me corresponde, yo te haré feliz. Ay, yo te haré feliz. Si me corresponde. Ay. Para tú casarte, que sea lo primero. Para tú casarte, que sea lo primero. Tú no sabes, mami, lo que yo te quiero. Tú no sabes, mami, lo que yo te quiero. Ay, lo que yo te quiero. Tú no sabes, mami.
¿Qué te digo? Al principio para mí fue un poquito difícil porque mi papá no quería. Mi papá decía a mi mamá que no quería ver a su hija pues tocando de fiesta en fiesta, tarde de la noche. Entonces, pues cada vez que yo iba a ensayar y eso, pues yo tenía que esconderme de él porque no quería. Entonces después los amigos de él, el vecindario comenzó a decirle, esa muchacha tranquila. Nuestra música es una música muy especial porque es una música que como que se siente dentro, como que tú la vives, como que te revive, ¿entiendes?
Negra linda, como tú lo sabes, como yo te quiero, no te quiere nadie. Como yo te quiero, no te quiere nadie. Nadie no te quiere nadie, como yo te quiero.
Y para tocarla hay que vivirlo. Yo siento que cuando yo me pongo un acordeón, tomo un acordeón, hago un merengue, primeramente lo vivo, lo siento. Un merengue que no me gusta no lo toco. Tiene que gustarme a mí para que así pueda, el que me está mirando pues también pueda sentir lo que yo siento.
I've learned nice. I've learned a few things about video in these excursions here. One is there. I don't know if you noticed what it said on his T-shirt. My wiener is bigger than your wiener. I'm not sure that if I had seen that, we would have had the camera exactly right there. It reminds me of an instructional mariachi DVD that we did, and we had little extras, 10-minute extras on a string making company in East Los Angeles. And after it was all done and edited, and I mainly edited, and I was looking at it to review, and right here on this black T-shirt was a bright green marijuana leaf. This was an instructional DVD for high school kids, and so we had to go back and do little one of those fade out thingies, for anonymous faces and things like that. In any case. Yeah, right. Yeah, we have a big hip-hop set in progress, so we'll see what happens to that. Anyway, so the Latino series, we have 41 recordings published so far. I think of 35 that were eligible. There were 3 Grammys, 1 Latin Grammy, 5 Grammy nominations, another Latin Grammy nomination. And so I think this idea of the story along with the great music has actually been received in that arena as well. We don't do what we do to get Grammys, but it sure, just like that newspaper spread, it amplifies the message and gets that out there. So anyway, I will now kind of close. Those were the story parts of the great music and great story, and kind of snuck some of the great music in with the great stories there too. So, any comments, questions, discussion, anything at all? Steve's the MC here.
One thing I would say, Dan, is please, when people do ask questions, repeat the question into the microphone.
Okay.
But please, any questions for
Thank you. Well, thank you. For the camera, that was an applause. That was an implicit question, I guess. So the answer is, I love you all. We have, this is really, this is like, you know, having 40 kids and just picking 4 to show off here. There's so many of these, and they're all available on our website, so go to folkways.si.edu, and you can watch 180-something videos all told. You can download those liner notes. I calculated if I worked 40 hours a week, it would take me about 2 years to read all the liner notes that you can download free, and about a year and a half to listen to all the 45,000 tracks of music as well. So, yes, Mr. Seaman back there. What's that? Do you think you and Russell could sing something? We could. Yeah, we'd have to charge you. There's also Juan down here, actually. Hey, Juan. Yes. So, sorry, Charlie. I don't know what the. I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm curious about the print on demand that you.
Yeah.
When I visited, I saw you were doing. Is that still doing that?
Yeah. As a matter of
So
fact.
you will have to issue a new recording or a reissue. You don't have to print 500, 1,000 copies. That you can make 3.
As a matter of fact, the question was if we still have what is called print on demand available, and I don't have it right here, but yes. In fact, it's a real problem in terms of financing recordings. It's a real problem. Right now, our digital delivery is about 50% of our total delivery now, which means that CD sales are way down. At the same time, the number of these custom CDs, one at a time, that pulls from the server, that we have a special machine, 2 machines that puts the notes on a PDF file and the audio on a disc, puts some print label on the disc, and then another machine prints out a label so you have a mini Folkways LP, a black sleeve with a shrunken version of the original LP, and this is how we're working with the UNESCO series, and we're also publishing new things. The music of the Maroons of Suriname, Aluku Maroons. We had a gorgeous Balinese recording from the 1960s, never published, and so this is a way that we avoid printing 5,000, which costs a lot of $20,000 or something. And also the warehousing, and also the transportation back and forth. The internet is a beautiful thing. There are serious reservations, though, because if you don't get it from us, let's say you get some Aboriginal music from Australia, from iTunes, everything we have is available on iTunes, you don't get the story. You don't, and I feel really badly about that. That's why we make all of our liner notes available free from our own website. So I think we sold something like 80,000 of these custom discs last year, which was the highest percentage ever. Of course, we got orders for the entire collection from China. You give us one of everything, and kind of thing, which accounts for about 3,000. We now have 3,170 albums in the collection. So that's a very important point for us. Yes, Patty, and then back here, and then Steve. Yeah. Oh yeah. In fact, right now with our partnership with the national. The question was, did the Ash family turn over any unpublished material? Yes, there's lots of unpublished material. We're working on a project right now to come out in advance of the launching of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in early 2016. We're publishing something like another 5 albums. Next one will be actually this album right here, Through the Streets of the City, New Orleans Bands. three musical generations of New Orleans bands. This is a new recording, but there's a 2 or 3 CD set of music recorded by Frederick Ramsey in the 1952 to 1950. I mean, another trip in 55 or 6, I think it was, in the Deep South, and it's 99.9% African American with bands, and Dave Evans has written the notes, and Lance Ledbetter of Dusted Digital has been the producer of the set. So this will come out, and we had like 35 hours of unpublished material just in the Frederick Ramsey stuff. So, and I know Russell, he did some poking around the archives and found lots of things that hadn't been published as well. Yes.
The question is, what are the criteria, if you have any, that you use when you in selecting the great story out of the great music?
That is the big question. And the question was, what are the criteria we use for selecting albums out of the gazillions of possibilities? That's the same challenge that when you do a festival, Folklife Festival program representing Colombia, for example, you have 40 million people, and you have all these regional traditions, and so what do? The idea is you work between a storyline that is going to communicate something, a message that in itself is ideally working with a community, or in the case of Colombia, with a festival, working with a research group, people from different parts of the country. In the case of, let me pick El Salvador, for example, that was pretty easy because we were looking for musical flags of identity from different countries, different regions of Latin America. And here was a story that was totally untold. It was highly relevant to the community in the United States and relevant to the population in El Salvador. And it was like standing right there waiting to happen. So that was a pretty easy thing to do. In the case of Colombia, some of it has to do with luck. Some of it has to do with kind of networking and finding the stories. You can never tell all the stories, and so that's something you have to come to terms with. Just doing the possible, and that's a big dimension of this as well. Finance, frankly, is another dimension of it. In the case of Colombia, part of my job is to network and know people, and in that case, we work with the Ministry of Culture, and worked with a musician, a producer, and a fellow who was a consultant with the Ministry of Culture, Carlos Rojas, who took us to the plains, and that's that eastern plains region, eastern Colombia, but western plains and Venezuela, it's all one region. And in the history of Colombia, it was really the power belt was that central core. And so these peripheral stories had not been told that much. And here was one of those peripheral stories to the cultural body politic. And we had an obviously highly recognized, senior person who knew everybody. He put together an album of 3 musical generations of musicians representing música llanera, music of the plains. And it was just one of my favorite albums because he was so skilled, so knowledgeable, so connected, and he knew the cultural politics as well as the music. And that album, that was one of the first Grammy nominations that the series got. And little did I know, until after it happened, that was we made the front page of the culture section of the national newspaper, and it turned out that was the first album recorded in Colombia that was nominated for a Grammy ever. Had no idea, but that happened, and that again pushed them out and accomplished their goals of getting more attention in the power belt of the country. So it's there are a lot of factors. Yes, Steve.
And my question is actually quite similar to the last two, but a different shade of that. So you have this great archive in which you have unreleased materials. You have wonderful materials that have been released but are now out of print except for the on-demand. And then you have the ability and mandate to make new recordings. So how do you strike the balance in any given year of what you're going to do out of each of those 3 possibilities?
Well, when I first thought of sort of came to grips with the idea of being a curator, somehow the word curandero came to. There was just some kind of, I don't know, some kind of resonance there, and there is a little magic to it, but it's like playing the piano or driving a race car, you know. It takes practice, and I tell you, there was certainly a lot of failures. One of the saddest failure for me was we did a recording of groups of musicians from Uganda, an album called "Singing for Life," that was included community groups of women who were HIV positive, and they were all performing traditional music where there were words. They were taking traditional melodies and putting words about behavioral education, you know, and how to avoid getting AIDS, how to encouraging people to go for it. Never got any traction, really, not goer. But a clarification in your question, which was complicated, how do we decide from all our collection what we get out there? Nothing is out of print. Right. So everything is in print and it's available. Yeah, I call it that. Yeah.
The on-demand. Some of the things you choose to reissue in a more packaged form, let's say.
Right. I'll tell you what the main decision is in that. I mean, that leads to a very important thing that we've been doing the last maybe 8 years, 10 years now, is since we're a collection, I love this museum thinking brought to a record label. I just love that. And so we came up with this thing called the Classic series. Classic this, classic that, and classic that. Classic Celtic from Smithsonian Folkways, classic blues from Classic Blues Volume 2, classic bluegrass. And the idea is to pull together 20, 25 tracks from a lot of those albums that are deeper in the collection, and then sell them for $10.99, which is a super good deal. And you know, because there are a lot of certain production costs that aren't part of doing that because it's already part of our collections. And pushing that out there as an invitation for people to come and dig deeper into the collection because they can get any of those source albums through Custom Disc, a program, or through single track downloads or album downloads or whatever they want to do. So that was one of those beautiful things. One of the most beautiful things can happen in an organization is for an idea to emerge that everybody can take credit for, because it wasn't one person's idea, it just sort of happened. And so that really is our principal strategy. We don't really reissue very much full albums. They're usually compilations. Right now we'll have a 119, or is it 117? I think it's 117 track, 5 CD, 140-page book set of Leadbelly recordings. 90-something% of that from our collection. And then, of course, we did the Woody Guthrie 200-page 3 CD set on the Guthrie Centennial Collection as a way, again, of kind of, this is a strategy, see, because the CD format is really dying. You know, one of our marketing guys said a very smart thing once. He says, if you want to see the future of the CD, look in the new cars, particularly the expensive ones that are coming out like Mercedes, and see if they have a CD player in them or not. Because if they don't, 10 years down the way, it's going to be something, it's going to be another format. Now, at the same time, there's still, just like the vinyl fanatics, love you all, the CD is being very slow to die. There's still this hardcore, and I just saw a study that came out like just 3 days ago. Serious percentage of people want to own a physical version of their music, not just have it on a drive that'll get blown up or something, like my computer didn't work here tonight, that kind of thing. They want to look at it, and they want to hold it, and they want to have that feeling of security. So all of this this is where the business strategies come together with the curatorial educational mission strategies. Thank you for that question. It ain't easy. Yes.
Do you have an entire, all the ingredients of a production house in-house? Do you have the designers? Do you have the people who can write the press releases? Do you have...
That's a good question. Okay. Do we have everything that one needs to produce everything that we produce? The answer is mainly yes. And when it's no, it's for good reasons. We contract with Shorefire in Brooklyn. They're a PR firm. We have a 3-person marketing staff. We have marketing and sales director. We have electronic marketing, and then we have physical marketing and licensing. Then we have sales staff of 3 or 4 that work out of our shop. So for the press releases to go to New York Times and LA Times and and all those kind of, we work with Showfire to do that. We have a contract with them. Designers, we have a stable of designers. Mary Mansour is our production manager, and she is the one. She says the sheepdog of Folkways. I think of her as the heart and soul of the essence of Folkways, because she just gets it so much. Nobody gets it more than Mary Mansour does. And so she'll get a certain album and think, okay, which design, she gets a feel for it, and she says, okay, which of these 5 designers, let's say, is going to be the right person with the right sensibilities and the right sort of design repertoire to come to bear on this, and then she will work with them and give them direction. We have sometimes contract translators. We have in-house copy editors, but we also contract copy editors as well. And what's missing? Producers. Sometimes we have co-producers. We have notes writers. Russell here is going to very soon give me a set of album notes here for a recording of Agustin Lira and his group Alma. He was one of the founders of Teatro Campesino in California. And so, we look to outside experts to help us as well. Is that? Thank you.
We've got time for one more question, if anyone has one.
Say it again.
Do you record dying music as well?
Live?
Dying music.
Dying?
Music which are going to die.
Remember I played rock and roll back in the 60s? I warned you about that earlier. I didn't say what long-term impact that had. But thank you for that question. If we record endangered musics, yes, we do. The challenge is that it's. Did I say this? That we almost entirely, yes, I did, exist off of revenues, right? So if we publish a recording and it sells, let's see, as our Peru series, we have 8 volumes of traditional music of Peru that was recorded in the early 90s, right after Sendero Luminoso, the Shining Path, sort of subsided. And it was a very ethnographic, a team that went out and recorded, and there's animals being sacrificed and people talking and all kinds of things going on there. And those probably sell about 15 a year. I calculated several times how much it costs us once we have a recording to give it a full treatment of just a regular plastic case CD. It's about $50,000 to $60,000 to produce it, to market it nationally, internationally. It's a lot of money. So if you have to figure out some way to bring that money in to make it happen. That is what's so beautiful about this custom disc thing. See, we still, there are artists to get paid. Our staff has to spend time copying, designing, working with the people. There's still a big commitment of time, and time does equal money when your salaries come from, revenues. And so it's still tough in any case. But that's why we did that, so we can publish the Balinese gamelan recording from the 60s, and we can publish the Aluko Maroons recording and a number of other things. We have, because of the stuff going on in Syria, we have in the pipeline a recording of Syrian Coptic chant. The Archbishop was kidnapped. I don't know if they ever found him. And so they're, Syria's in the news, and so here's an opportunity for us to get something out.
So you don't have to make a profit, but you just have to break even.
Yes, that is exactly it. Yeah, I can talk about that for a long time because I feel it every day when I wake up in the morning. The responsibility of having to bring in enough money to keep us going. Basically, that keeps me awake in the morning. So I still have my cappuccino though. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, you know what? And I'll tell you that's interesting. She said the implicit question was, good thing we have Ella Jenkins and the children's artists. Children's music is really hanging in there within the CD format. Elizabeth Mitchell. We did a recording by Chip. What was his name? He was the guy who wrote Wild Thing. And then he was a professional gambler, and then he got grandchildren, and he started writing children's music, and so we have a recording by him. We have Jose Luis Orozco, is his first album with Folkways. He's like the #1 Latino children's music artist in the United States that's coming out, and the children's stuff is going strong in CD format. In fact, we still have some LPs available because, incredible to believe, but some schools still use turntables for music. So some of the old Ella Jenkins things, for example, are available in that format. So thank you all very much. Mwah. Mwah. Thank you. Thanks for coming.